Hey everybody, HRCYED 2.0. What are you talking about? That's so done. Right? So I'm here to talk about whether I actually ended up finishing HRCYED 2.0. HRCYED 2.0 stopped on like the 7th of July or something like that. So this video is late, but I am also the type of person who's like, when something is done, it's over, it's gone in my mind. And so I knew I wasn't going to finish this. Spoiler. I was kind of done with it as well. But I did still, in the final month, spend quite some effort on trying to get as many problems as possible still done. So we did still make some progress, okay? So let's go through them. So this was where I was at the end of May, right? And when it comes to the month of June, let's look at what I was still able to add in terms of progress. So unfortunately, June was not a great reading month. I only read 6 books in June. So while I was determined to still finish as many problems as possible, clearly the reading mood was not actually there to do a lot of things about that. But we still tried, okay? And we still tried, I do mean that I still didn't actually pick up a 2019 book. So unfortunately, the last 10 years prompt did not get completed, even though I was 1 book shy of it, even though I read enough books to be able to do the 12 years if I would have just gotten 2019, you were allowed to kind of shift and be like, okay, I'll read from what is it, 2015 to 2025 or 2016 to 2026. But of course, if you drop a year somewhere in the middle, then you might as well not have read any book for this prompt because, yeah, that's what ended up happening. But I mean, with having read 11 out of 12 books for this prompt, I do feel like I am validated in having gotten really, really close. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, very far away from it, right? All the adaptations also didn't end up being completed. I did not end up reading a graphic novel, a play, and yeah, that's it. The problem with filming this late is that I don't actually remember whether I made certain shifts in between the books that were counting for one thing and books that were counting for another thing. So maybe I did because May was Asian American Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander month, and I don't remember whether I just didn't read a book that fit this prompt in May, and that is why I read a book for it in June. But in any case, I counted The Man Who Died Twice. No, The Man Who Died 7 times for this, which is a book by Yasuhiko Nishizawa. And this is a Japanese book about a man who dies 7 times, right? So our protagonist is his grandson, and the whole family kind of is celebrating the new year over at their grandfather's place. And every year, the grandfather kind of indicates who his new heir is going to be because the grandfather has a huge fortune at his disposal. He's always asking them to dress in a certain color. And when he has announced the new heirs to his, let's say, empire, he ends up being murdered. However, this grandson has somewhat of a condition where occasionally he will kind of slip into a time loop, and that time loop will then happen 9 times, I think. And so this is the beginning of one of these time loops. And then June itself was Pride Heritage Month, and for that I read The Emposium by Olga Tokarczuk. This is a reimagining of the Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, and so we're following a group of young guys who are basically spending time at the sanatorium in the Swiss Alps, talking about life, talking about their experiences, talking about philosophy, politics, and all of those types of things while they're being treated for tuberculosis, right? This book ultimately did disappoint me. I didn't really enjoy it all that much, but I did enjoy the queer elements to it and sort of like the reclaiming of women's narrative in this one as well. I definitely I definitely appreciated the sort of like twist to the story, but on the other hand, queer identity shouldn't be a twist, so I'm not entirely sure of my feelings about this book in the end. But with that, I did finish the Heritage Month prompt. I just didn't read anything for the bonus prompt, which is Caribbean American Heritage, but I read for all of the mandatory Heritage Month prompts. For the Around the World challenge, in the end, I didn't count a book for Africa. I could have counted a African-inspired fantasy. I did read at least one of those, no, two of those, but I didn't really want to. I felt like I wanted to have a book that's actually set in Africa, and unfortunately, I didn't get around to one within the time frame of HRCYED 2.0, which is something to be worked on. It's definitely it's a continent that I don't gravitate towards, clearly, within my reading. I have read some amazing books set in Africa, though, like Chigozie Obioma's, I can't come up with a book, but I read a book by him that was really great. It's one of my favorite books, I would say, that I've read in the past decades, let's say. So I definitely have had good experiences with books written by African authors, but clearly it's something that I need to be focusing on a little bit more. I think when I read books by Black authors, they're mainly books that are kind of taking place in the UK or in the US. So I don't necessarily see this as a gap in my reading on the regular, but a whole content is a whole continent is a gap, of course. And I think in general, I do think that there is a lack of reading from the Southern Hemisphere happening within my reading, that I'm mainly pushed towards reading from Europe, from America, and from Asia, because I am definitely reading a lot of Asian literature as well. And so Australian, I might be reading, I'm just not really noticing that. And then, the Central Latin American and African literature is definitely a much smaller proportion of my reading. I don't necessarily want to really take statistics of my reading neither, but on the other hand, it could be interesting for things like this, right? But I don't really want to feel like my reading is becoming, work where I want to be analyzing all of the things I can about my reading life. So to that extent, I'm like, yeah, I also shouldn't be taking note of all of these things when it comes to my reading, because then it'll just start to feel like I'm trying to hit certain targets. But it's definitely something to be more aware of now going forward, that I should try and read a little bit more from those countries. Definitely, I think Latin America is the one I read more of, but even then, I don't think that I read a ton of Latin American literature neither. And that's probably as well because with Latin America, with the exception of Brazil, I'm always thinking like, yeah, but then I should read it in Spanish. And that's a hurdle. But that's a hurdle that I'm posing on myself, of course. And then I also didn't read for the bonus continent of Antarctica. I think Antarctica was mentioned once in a book that I read, but I definitely didn't think that that was enough to count it for the Antarctica prompt. Then for the Even Bigger Rainbow, I did add a book. So I read The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella, which in Dutch, which is the edition that I listened to, has an orange cover. This is a sort of like romance about this woman who is a little bit in a burnout, as the title suggests, and goes to this town that she used to spend her childhood at the seaside. And so she's going to a hotel there that was like this really fancy hotel that she never got to visit. But now it turns out that the hotel is a little bit dilapidated in the meantime, and there's this other guest over there who's completely annoying her, and we know where that goes, right? And then I also counted The Man Who Died Seven Times for the yellow color prompt in here, which meant that I finished the Even Bigger Rainbow, and so that entire challenge is completed. This was basically mainly my focus in the month of June, was trying to get that one done. And then for the Bigger Queer Alphabet, I unfortunately didn't finish it. This is my biggest shame, I feel like, and definitely with the month of June, it would have been ideal to try and focus on queer literature. As I said, it was not a reading month. I read like 2,300 pages that month, whereas typically I read about an average of 100 pages a day. So I was not in the reading mood, and unfortunately, this challenge suffered from it. So I did finish one book. So I did add the intersex representation by reading The Empusian by Olga Tokarczuk. But I then didn't have a book for asexual, which is sad because that's what I identify as, non-binary, and yeah, that's it. I did end up shuffling things around a little bit in here, I think, as well, but basically that's where we go, because I think I moved the deep from intersex to gender fluid, maybe, and that is why I have one more prompt completed, even though I only read one book for this in June. Okay, BIPOC author was already completed. I might have switched around the authors a little bit, but then I cannot remember that, so there we go. And then for the new releases, we did have to go for a final new release, which is the June release, and I didn't. Oh, I didn't. I didn't even remember that I didn't do that. Did I not do that? True, I didn't have a June release that month. So this is what I mean when I say that, when I see that it's like difficult or impossible for me to complete something, then I'm also just like not that interested anymore, because I was definitely looking at like which problems, like which challenges within this overall year-long challenge can I still try and finish. And since had been keeping up with the monthly releases up until that point, this is definitely one that would have been high on my ranking. But I don't remember my thinking here. Did I just not have a June release that I was like super eager to get to, or that I wanted to prioritize, or that it was like the right time for? Or did I just completely forget about it? The nonfiction challenge had been a lost race for a while, but I did end up adding one to it. So I have now read 3 out of 5 for this challenge. So I read Eleanor, wait, let me get the full title, A 200-Mile Walk in Search of England's Lost Queen. So this is a nonfiction about a Queen Eleanor, who was the wife of Charles I or second or something like that, 15th century England, I think. And basically, when she passed away, there was this funeral procession that went from the place in which she passed away up until London. And so the author of this nonfiction is basically recreating that story, or basically recreating that hike, and telling us about the life of Eleanor along the way, but also about the towns that she passes along the way, the making of the monuments, because basically 7, I think, crosses were made for this procession march, and they were placed in these different towns along the way. Only a few of them still remain to this day, unfortunately. But so it was talking about that, and I enjoyed this one because this was was like a historical nonfiction that mixes a lot of things, and that therefore felt more sort of like you're going on a walk with somebody who has a lot of sort of like facts at their disposal, and them flinging those at you along the way. And I did really enjoy that vibe, rather than have it be a book that's like solely focused on the character of Eleanor. I did enjoy getting to know a little bit about like what certain towns are like famous for, and the history of those towns in terms of the industry that has helped build and support them. And then for the make a quote prompt, which is probably the final one we'll talk about here, I did read some books for it. So The Burnout counts for this prompt, as well as A Darkness at Setanon and Eleanor. But in principle, I filmed a vlog for this that has not seen the light of day, and I don't think that I've ever finished it. I also did not finish the quote, so try and guess what quote you can make out of those 3 titles. I will say that the Eleanor one uses the full titles, also the subtitle. The word Eleanor is not in my quote. But so yes, then the final thing, I don't think I made any progress in for that month. So final thing was for the personal challenge. The personal challenge was a challenge for me to read something I just really wanted to pick up, for like two books per each of the final 2 months, right? Because that's when I finally came up with I need to do the personal challenge one, right? And so in June, I ended up reading The House Witch 2, and I ended up reading The House Witch 3 as well, as sort of like a treat to myself. As I said, I was not really in the reading mood in the month of June, and so getting to just pick something up, even though it would have not counted for HRCYED otherwise, was really a treat. So I did enjoy that personal challenge. And, in hindsight, I would have wanted to do that for every month, of course, but these types of things where I have to fill them out myself don't really work for me. And that is also why I shall not be participating in HRCYED 3.0, because I just feel like there's too much flexibility in the prompts. And while that is appealing to some, for me that just makes it less appealing, so I'm not going to do it. Also, I definitely, while I enjoyed the new release prompt because it kind of forced me to keep up with new releases, it also was very stressful to do so. So yeah, that I enjoyed it, but it also was a curse at certain times. And so I think I want to remove the pressure from a year-long readathon from me for the year to come. But so that means that I am close when it comes to finishing out HRCYED 2.0. I was close. I was over 90% along the way. But, you know, you can be that close, but if you don't make up the cutoff time, then you're still eliminated, right? But so yes, I did have a good time with HRCYED 2.0. I did enjoy branching out a little bit. I do like that it has shown me the gap in my reading when it comes to the continent of Africa and Australia. And, you know, it was a fun experience. And I definitely enjoyed that it was an experience that was shared by a lot of the bookish community over the year that has just gone by. I enjoyed watching other people tackle this challenge, talking about other people's progress within the challenge. And so that aspect of it, I definitely enjoyed a lot. But it's just not enough for me to want to put myself through it another year. But so yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. See you guys for the next one. Bye!